Hi, this is Mashnu, and I have here my second game, over the board game of the club competition of this season. So this was a slow game, played with a time limit of 1.5 hours for each player for the first 35 minutes. 35 moves, and after that we get 15 minutes to finish the game. I was playing black, and my opponent opened with d4, and I played the Benoni defense. And you remember perhaps that in the first round I played a game where my opponent didn't develop all his pieces before he started to look for dynamic play, and something similar happened actually here in this game. I played here bishop to b5 check. That is not a common move. Bishop to b5 check is played after f4 in some variations, but immediately I hadn't seen it, so I took some time to think whether to play knight to d7 or bishop to d7, and I decided to play bishop to d7. Now he continued with bishop to g5, pinning my knight on f6. So it seems like he's going for active attacking play. Bishop to g7, and now he came with the move queen to f3, and I think this is too much. White is trying to increase the pressure on f6, but this queen on f3 is actually taking away the natural square where the knight should be developed. The knight from g1 should go to f3, so this queen is occupying this square. What I did here is I took on a b5 check. After knight takes b5, queen a5, and when I took on b5 I hadn't seen that queen to c3 is possible here, so I was a bit surprised by that. Now it's not that dramatic, but sometimes in a game you notice after a few moves that you miss one of the variations, and then you hope that you didn't make a mistake by not examining all the moves. So I had only calculated knight to c3 here, but he played queen to c3, so the knight on b5 is hanging, and white wants to regain the piece on f6. So what to do here? There are mainly two options: queen takes b5 and queen takes c3 check. After queen takes c3, knight takes c3, knight b to d7. Looks okay, not much happening. And after queen takes b5, then white would play bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, and in that position I thought, if I give then a check on b4 with my queen, he will have to move his king, so he will lose the right to castle. And that's exactly what happened. I took on b5, he took on f6, I took back on f6, queen takes f6, and now queen to b4 check. The king must move, king to f1, and now of course my rook on h8 is attacked, so I castled. Here he could take on d6, or he could defend the pawn on e4. My opponent chose to play rook to e1, but let's have a look at queen takes d6, the other option. In that case I would have played knight to a6. My idea is to connect my both rooks, put them one rook anyway on the e file, perhaps one on the d file, one on the e file, and have pressure against this pawn on e4. After rook to e1, for example, rook f to e8, f3 to defend it well, and then I can take on b2. So this looks, I find, good for black. The development of the king side has to start yet, while black already is completely developed. Well, let's go back to the game now. Here's where we left. He played rook to e1. Now he's threatening to take on d6, of course, because the pawn on e4 is now very well defended, so I played queen to b6. He continued with h4 now, so trying to exploit the weakness of my dark squares here by advancing this pawn, and also this is a way to develop this rook with a rook lift, now that the king is on f1, so the rook cannot be developed the normal way, let's say. I still think that instead of h4, knight to f3 would have been a better move. Just develop it directly. Knight to d7, attacking the queen, queen to c3, rook a to e8, and now he played h5. It looks very aggressive, but in fact there is not much going on here. I gave a check on b5. Then he went with the knight to e2, and I took the pawn on e4. Notice that also after rook to e2 here, I also can take on e4, because the rook will be pinned. So it doesn't, there's no difference. Now this knight on e2 is a big problem for white, because this knight is pinned. The king cannot move to g1 because then I will take the knight. The rook cannot move and the knight cannot move. That means that at this point white has to play the game with only two pieces, the rook and the queen. The game continued with taking on g6, f takes g6, and now another beautiful line is opened here, the f line. Rook to h3, knight to f6, queen to c2, defending once more e2, so now the king could go later to g1, or the rook can be used. And there is also another consequence of this move, queen to c2, that I didn't see here, but it will become clear just a few moves further. I played rook to e5, attacking the d5 pawn twice, rook to b3, attacking my queen went to d7, and now he played knight to f4. And here I thought for quite a long time, can I take on d5 or not? Now after the game, when I was reviewing it, I saw that with the help of Fritz, I saw that the move knight to g4 would have been very strong here, in fact almost winning. In the game I took on d5, but let me show you first knight to g4. In that case I'm of course threatening to take on f4. If it takes on e5, then d takes e5. Still the knight is now hanging, so the knight goes to f3 to be able to defend f2, but here queen takes d5, so the pawn is retaken and the position of white is very very weak, especially this f2 square, and all my pieces are activated in the attack, and he has no way of having any kind of counterattack. In the game I didn't play knight to g4, I played knight takes d5, and I had to calculate this whole variation. It took knight takes d5, rook takes d5, queen to c4, pinning the rook, queen to f7 to avoid this pin, to stop the pin, then queen to rook to f3, and here it looks as if my queen has no place to go and I have to give up the rook, but of course my rook is now not pinned anymore, so I could play rook to f5. So until this point I had calculated it when I took the pawn on d5 with my knight. I want to go back just one more time, because I told you that after the move queen to c2 that was played by my opponent a few moves ago, there was another consequence. that I didn't consider, and that is that this queen was not only protecting the e2 knight, it's also directed to g6, and these are the tricky things that can happen in a game where you have the idea that you have all the correct plans and positions, and suddenly this kind of surprises can happen. Here my opponent could have played rook takes e5, and after d takes e5 sacrifice on g6. Now I must not take on g6, because if h takes g6, queen takes g6 check, rook g7, queen e6 check, rook f7, queen takes d5, and here white has a good position. The material is equal, but the activity of his pieces suddenly is very strong. The centralized queen, my rook is pinned. He is threatening to take on b7, is threatening to take on f5, is threatening also rook to g3, winning the queen. So this looks not good for me. So that's the reason why after knight takes g6, the best defense for black is simply to play the queen to f5. Here, after queen to f5, takes f5, rook takes f5, rook to d3 attacking my knight. If I go to b4, rook d8 check, king g7, now his knight can go to h4. Now I need to defend the 7th rank, so rook to f7 is the best move, and we have here an endgame that is of course better for black. I'm a pawn up, but it's still quite a big job to win this. Well, this about this possible sacrifice on g6 that didn't happen, because in the game after knight takes d5 my opponent played knight takes d5, rook takes, queen c4, queen f7, rook f3, rook to f5, and here queen takes f7, rook 5 takes f7. He traded this queen as well, and here I have a very good endgame. 2 pawns up, and something happened that happens well, often actually. When we have a winning position, a winning endgame, we tend to relax and spend less time moving, thinking about our moves. So I made a mistake, but luckily for me it was not that bad. I still could win the game. This is how the game continued. Now everything is here just fine. I'm advancing my pawns, activating my rook and my king, and here I was actually doubting what plan to follow. Where to go? Could I go with my king to d5, or should I go back, or should I put the rook in between? What's the plan to win here? I have these 2 passed pawns here, but the king is also in front of them. I played rook to e6, rook to f7, and here in fact was the mistake that I made. I played h5, but a much more simple way to win was by advancing my pawn to c4. After b takes e4, b takes e4, rook takes h7, c3 check, king to d3, rook to e1. Now my rook penetrates there and enters the enemy position to attack the weak pawns on a2 and g2, and also to support the advance of my own pawn. So here if rook to h8, check, check again, and after king b3, c2, it's winning for me if this, for example, would happen. So well, this is not how the game went, because it took for me a bit longer by playing h5 and giving him this a pawn, king to e5. My plan was to walk with my king towards the to g3 to take that pawn and simply give this pawns here. He took, I played a rook to b6 and then advancing my pawns on this side. He played now a4, and this means that he's probably winning one more pawn there, because I cannot take on a4 because then rook takes c5 is with check. I played h4. I'm threatening to advance this pawn to h3 and then promote. My opponent played f4 check, and here it's important not to take the pawn on f4, because what I want to do is I want to have a passed h pawn. If I would take on f4, he would take g takes h4, and he will have the outside passed pawn that is the further away from the center and from the kings than my passed pawn. So in an endgame it's good to have a passed pawn that is far away from where the kings are, so it's more difficult to stop it. So here I played king to e4, because now if white takes on h4, I take back on h4. If it takes on g5, I will simply play h3. He took on h4, g takes h4, rook takes b5, rook to c6, and from here it was simply a matter of counting, and in all variations black wins. He advanced, I advance, and then after a7, of course I don't queen right now, but first play rook to a6, and here my opponent resigned. So that was the game this time, and I hope you found this interesting, and I'll see you next time on YouTube. Leave your comments. Goodbye.